This is Matthew Brenner. Today is April 8th, 2017. On Tuesday, April 4th, the mainstream media reported that there was a chemical weapons attack in Idlib province, or that region of Syria, and apparently Donald Trump took the bait and he launched 59 cruise missiles in the Horns province on a government-controlled Air Force base, and I am skeptical about this whole thing. I'm skeptical whether or not the Trump administration has been co-opted by the deep state, by Jared Kushner. When you see everybody like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, Hillary Clinton, the mainstream media, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, all these guys getting excited by the U.S. attacking Syria, I think it's a bad thing. Let's go to what Donald Trump had to say about his attack on Syria.
On Tuesday, Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad launched a horrible chemical weapons attack on innocent civilians. Using a deadly nerve agent, Assad choked out the lives of helpless men, women, and children. It was a slow and brutal death for so many. Even beautiful babies were cruelly murdered in this very barbaric attack. No child of God should ever suffer such horror. Tonight I ordered a targeted military strike on the airfield in Syria from where the chemical attack was launched. It is in this vital national security interest of the United States to prevent and deter the spread and use of deadly chemical weapons. There can be no dispute that Syria used banned chemical weapons, violated its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention, and ignored the urging of the UN Security Council.
Go into greater detail. We see these beautiful pictures at night from the decks of these two U.S. Navy vessels in the Eastern Mediterranean. I am tempted to quote the great Leonard Cohen, "I'm guided by the beauty of our weapons." And they are beautiful pictures of fearsome armaments making what is for them a brief flight over to this airfield.
Senator, thanks very much for coming in. Do you believe that Russia played an actual role in the delivery of those chemical weapons to kill those civilians, including a lot of children the other day, that they were involved or at a minimum knew about it?
I would imagine that they would probably know about it since they are allies of Bashar Assad, but they're the ones that use the precision weapons against hospitals in Aleppo. Look, they're as bad as Bashar Assad. Come on, they've helped them with the barrel bombs. They've bailed them out time after time. But especially, again, it was Russian aircraft with precision weapons that specifically targeted hospitals. It sent drones over, identify them, and then attack them.
So Putin had promised the U.S. that they would do whatever was necessary to remove all of Syria's chemical weapons stockpiles a few years back, right?
Yeah, that was another great victory of the Obama administration and John Kerry. They used to brag about their failure to act after they said they were going to. You know, there's
the red line.
Yeah, the red line. There's one thing worse than not acting, and that's to say you're going to act and then not act. And that's what Obama and Kerry did.
So if Bashar al-Assad has committed war crimes, and you believe he has, right?
Sure.
So what you're saying is Putin has committed war crimes in Syria as well.
Certainly complicit. He's certainly complicit. I'm sure you saw the front page story of the Wall Street Journal, a terrible story about the prisons in Damascus and the thousands of people that are starved and beaten and assaulted and killed.
Assad had an air force, and that air force is the cause of most of the civilian deaths. as we have seen over the years and as we saw again in the last few days. And I really believe that we should have and still should take out his airfields and prevent him from being able to use them to bomb innocent people and drop sarin gas on them. So
yesterday, there was some bombing with possibly gas exposure in Syria, and things have changed. It reminds me sort of weather reports. Well, if you don't like the weather, just wait an hour. You know, you'll get different weather. Well, that's sort of what happens in the Middle East sometimes. That just wait, it'll change. And actually, you know, before this episode of possible gas exposure and who did what, things were going along reasonably well for the conditions. You know, Trump says let the Syrians decide who should run their country, and peace talks were breaking out, and Al Qaeda and ISIS were on the run, on maybe defeated. So it was like, you know, in spite of their problems with this foreign policy, it looked like there was some benefit, but it looks like maybe somebody didn't like that, so there had to be an episode. And the blame now is that we can't let that happen, because it looks like it might benefit Assad. So Assad, they claim, now went and released gas to kill a bunch of people. But, Daniel, we might not have much of a job here today, because I looked at the New York Times to find out, to get the explanation, and they said, worst chemical attack in years in Syria. U.S. blames Assad. So it's all over and done with. But not quite so easy, is it? What happened 4 years ago in 2013, you know, this whole thing about crossing the red line, and ever since then, the neocons have been yelling and screaming. Even part of the administration is still yelling and screaming about Assad using poison gases on his people 4 years ago. Not quite true.
Yeah, it was never proven, in fact. And the UN official Carla Del Ponte said that attack was most likely done by the rebels based on the evidence. But here you have Nikki Haley, U.S. ambassador to the UN, almost as we speak, literally at the UN Security Council, saying, quote, "We know Assad has used chemical weapons before." It's not true. It has never been proven that he has. He may have. We do know that the rebels have used them. That has been proven.
And who would benefit? It makes no sense, even if you were totally separate from this and take no signs of this, and you were just an analyst. It doesn't make any sense for Assad under these conditions to all of a sudden use poison gases. It's zero, I think it's zero chance that he would have done this, deliberately, and he's doing this now. But we could also go to a famous senator who's an expert on foreign policy, and we could go ask John McCain to explain it, and he found somebody to blame. And I don't know what he has it in for the president. We criticize our president once in a while, and we try to be, balanced and criticize the things we think he's doing that we don't like. But McCain says blame Trump.
Because John McCain was and is a scumbag.
April 1917, 100 years ago, President Woodrow Wilson addressed a joint session of Congress to request a declaration of war against Germany. Today marks the 100th anniversary of the United States entering that disastrous war where 8.5 million men were killed, 37 million were casualties, all because of egos, the egos of the leaders of the great powers. 100 years ago, history seems to be repeating itself. I am a conservative peacenik. Do you want war with Russia? All of you idiots, all of you fools who are pounding the war drums. Democrats have been poking the Russian bear since Trump won the election. The constant accusations of them fixing our election is not making them any friendlier towards us. And why are the Democrats pushing war with Russia? Because Trump said he could work with them, but it didn't stop there. People in Trump's own sphere are now moving him towards the beating of the war drums. Dems and the establishment GOP both handcuffed loyal Trump advisors like Jeff Sessions and now Devin Nunes to take themselves out of any investigations of the so-called Russia conspiracy. Steve Bannon, a close advisor, was stepped down from his NSC role. And what happened the very same day that he stepped down? War drums, war drums, war drums. It seems the generals want war with Russia. It's the generals who will gain great power if we have war with Russia. It's the generals who led the world into World War I, which, as I said, caused 37 million casualties. It was the frail egos of the warmongers in the military-industrial complex all over again. It seems to me Steve Bannon, a true conservative, no question about it, was fighting with the generals to prevent this insanity of declaring war with Russia. The minute Steve Bannon was pushed aside, the generals took control. The very next second, Trump started saying Assad has to go. Mr. President, who is whispering in your ear? Who could have made you make this dramatic turnabout in just a few days? I believe it's the generals. Trump has given generals great power in his administration, and they're now using it to their advantage just as they did in World War I. Like Mr. Trump, Woodrow Wilson. You know Woodrow Wilson? Woodrow Wilson ran on an America First platform. He was a populist. He was also an anti-war activist. Did you know that Wilson was elected because he kept us out of the war in Europe? But someone got to Woodrow Wilson also. They turned him to declare that, quote, neutrality was no longer feasible or desirable. And after World War I, when Wilson tried to rally the world for a lasting peace and to form the League of Nations, our Congress wanted no part of it. And the deal that was reached to secure the peace in Europe became a punishment to the losers. And where did that lead? It led to the humiliation of Germany. What did that lead to? An even greater conflict where millions more died in World War II. And what happened in that body yesterday, the United Nations? Nikki Haley, Trump's pick for UN ambassador, laid the law down to Russia about the attacks in Syria, saying their acts were, well, war crimes, basically, accusing Syria for their complicity in the deaths of children. Do we even know who dropped the gas canisters? Was there an investigation to prove definitively that it was, in fact, the Syrian Air Force that dropped the gas canisters? How do we not know that it's not a game being played again, where the so-called Syrian rebels put in by the CIA, the deep state, are launching gas attacks on the Syrian innocents in order to stir a bigger war? How do we not know? Maybe Steve Bannon was the one fighting with the generals, the only one standing against war, and now he's gone. It's the generals, I will repeat, who rushed world powers into World War I, and it's happening again in front of our eyes. You see the generals' powers increase with war, and they shouldn't want war. The generals should want peace. During the campaign, President Trump came on the air on the Savage Nation on this program, and he said that if he was elected, he would talk to Russia, to Putin, even before he took office. I like that a lot. That's why I supported him. That's what making peace is all about. But the evil, sick, degenerate Democrats have turned making peace with Russia into a crime, and they want to impeach him over it. The generals have gotten to Trump and turned him from peace with Russia. And the people standing in the way of war, maybe Steve Bannon was the only one, were thrown out of the White House, out of the inner council. This beating of the war drums has to stop, Mr. President, and it has to stop now. But a very wise man emailed me before the show, and I said, what do you think is going to happen? The wise man said, well, to prove that he's anti-Russia, he's going to fall for it. He voted for Trump, by the way. The idiot fake conservatives, the neocon ventriloquists, will say it proves that Trump is strong and he's able to stand up to Putin. He said Assad is finished. ISIS will take over Syria. The most important thing in this world is not the economy. It's peace. Domestic peace, international peace, peace between individuals, peace between nations is far more important than gross domestic product or low interest rates. Hundreds of years ago, I wrote, Thomas Hobbes said the very first law of nature is to seek peace. My friends, this is the essence of true conservatism. And I'm not just talking about the absence of military war on the battlefield. I'm talking about peace between individuals and groups within society. It's the opposite of progressivism, which seeks nothing but conflict. Progressives promote conflict between people of different racial groups, different sexual orientations, and different income levels. They even promote conflict between men and women. What are my savage solutions? 1, stand firm on peace with Russia. 2, combat the war propaganda with the bully pulpit. Destroy ISIS and then leave the Middle East. Bring our troops home from unnecessary deployments. I stand by those very words. At the same time this is going on, as you well know, the head of China just arrived an hour ago, Palm Beach. I was quite surprised that the president arrived an hour later. I don't know who's advising the president, but if he had asked me, he would not have arrived an hour later as though he's on a date, trying to act like he's, let's say, better than the date. I never saw anything like this. Why was he not in Palm Beach to greet the president of China? I'm asking another question, another violation of protocol. Who is running this administration? And then, I'm sorry to say, Ivanka Trump gets off the plane in a miniskirt, a blue miniskirt. Who is advising this administration? It certainly isn't Michael Savage. Do you remember when they made that huge gaffe with Taiwan? Shortly after McConnell's wife, a Taiwanese national, was named Secretary of the Transportation. Remember that? She was the first cabinet appointee. Mitch McConnell's wife made Secretary of Transportation. Nice lady, smart lady, good lady. Nothing wrong with her. The very next day or so, Trump committed a huge gaffe by publicly attacking China's one-child policy. Excuse me, by attacking China with regard to Taiwan. Huge mistake, never should have been done publicly. Mr. President, listen to me. I am your greatest supporter. Do not let the warmongers bring us to war with Russia.
And Dr. Pachenik, before the election, became very outspoken, and he would come onto our show very frequently, and we wouldn't have pictures of him, but he came out before the election saying this is a coup against the globalists. And so, Dr. Pachenik, I want to ask you, is there a counter coup going on now in the White House? What do you make of all this?
Well, I think that's what is important to understand, David, is two elements in this. Number one, in order to refresh your memory and your audience's memory, I was involved with our military intelligence about 8-9 years ago, just before the Syrian civil war, when I literally went into Syria and Bashar Assad and his people interrogated me and then allowed me to travel all over the country for 18 days. What I came out of that was, and I reported this to my contacts in military intelligence, was a very simple point, that Bashar Assad was not going to leave. And I had also worked against Hafiz Assad, his father. So I understood very well that Hafiz Assad, Bashar Assad, the all Alawite community, which is a minority community in Syria, would still dominate a predominantly Sunni country. What happened subsequently was that Assad was not very effective in handling what was really a water war. And the people from Homs and Hama came up, and they were Sunnis, and they protested the handling of the water, distribution of food subsequently. Anyway, what subsequently happened is that our intelligence community, through the CIA and other elements of the civilian part, created ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and you've talked about it. But the most important part was that our military understood very clearly what it was that I was saying, and understood that there was no way we were going to be in the business of regime changing. Having said that, I understand a little bit about General McMaster and even General Mattis. And I think the important thing to remember in both these gentlemen, and also the surrounding facts, is that President Trump initiated this strike just at the moment when when Kim Ji-pong, when President Xi Jinping of China was literally at the doorstep of Mar-a-Lago. And he did this, and I think our military did it, for very important reasons. Number one, it was a very clear message to President Xi, more than to anybody else, more than Russia, more than the ISIS or anybody else, that, listen, you, President Xi, you were involved in violence during the Chinese Cultural Revolution. You don't like violence. We don't like violence. But if you have any question as to the resolve of a president, i.e. Trump, as opposed to Obama or anyone else, Let me reassure you that I will order a strike against some base, air base, which is not as relevant as anybody thinks, and it will be done in your presence. I think President Xi Jinping was absolutely stunned by what he saw and what he realized. That message that was sent to President Xi Jinping was also translated to Prime Minister and President and CEO of North Korea, Kim Jong-un, who has been playing around with nuclear weapons as a way of creating some leverage for negotiation. Our only negotiation, quite frankly, is through China. China can literally suppress anything that North Korea wants to do. Our military does not want to go into North Korea. They don't want to do preemptive action. They don't want to go into a war in Syria. Our military does not want to follow the neocons, even though some neocons correctly came in, but they were thrown out. Thanks to Alex Jones, myself, and others. Elliot Abrams didn't come in. A whole bunch of others didn't come in. But when we're talking about our generals, McMaster, who wrote The Dereliction of Duty, we're talking about General Mattis. They understood very clearly that war is not the solution to what our problem is. What is a solution is what I call the kabuki of war. In other words, we will show you what we're capable of doing at the right time and the right place. So the Syrian so-called attack was really done not for Syria, not for Russia. All of them were cleared beforehand. Russia understood this was happening. Turkey was informed. Every country was informed. Saudi Arabia, Israel, even Syria, and Bashar Assad understood it. But the only people who were not informed was President Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un. What this means now is that the matrix of negotiation with the president of China and North Korea has suddenly shifted to our advantage. For 20 to 30 years, I've been involved with North Korea, and quite frankly, it's been frustrating. I've been held back on my capability to do regime change because I knew exactly how to take down the North Koreans. The greatest fear China has, and has been a fear for the United States for the past 30 years, but has not been my fear, is the fact that we can literally destabilize the borders of North Korea. We can do it militarily, we can do it economically, we can do it politically. What Trump was doing and what the generals were doing was saying, look, we're not going to get into the business of attacking North Korea. We're not going to get into the business of destabilizing your borders. But if you don't change your behavior, we can assure you that we have the willpower to do whatever is necessary to inculcate and to execute whatever actions we need. So in effect, this whole scenario was never really done for Syria or for the Middle East. We're not interested in the Middle East, quite frankly. We're pulling away from the Middle East, even though we're sending in some soldiers to finish up the work in Raqqa and Mosul. But for the most part, we're going to be shifting to the Asia, to southern China, which is what I wrote about 20 years ago, the Spratly Islands. So in some ways, David, you have to look back at this as a very clever way of the art of the deal. In other words, everybody was looking to Syria, where at the same time I was looking at Kim Jong-un and I was looking at President Xi Jinping. Now, President Xi Jinping is very smart. This is not a warlord. This is a gentleman who lost his father and by humiliation of Mao Zedong. He understands what fighting is. He understands what personally being beaten up means about. He understands that we can ruin the Chinese economy at will. He understands that we can destroy their water capacity. He understands that we can destroy the infrastructure, but he doesn't want this. On the other hand, the Chinese have maintained their Middle Kingdom complex, which means we can do no wrong in China, and you are the peasants, and you are the gaijin, or the foreigners, who have to come to us. What President Trump did was to turn the table around psychologically and said, you know what? Now let's negotiate. Now let me understand what you understood in terms of my action. And he did this in a scenario which is totally inappropriate for a war scenario, and that is at a beautiful banquet with the gorgeous women, with wine and all the accoutrements of the rich. But at the same time, the point was made, and President Xi Jinping understood it very quickly, as did all his generals, that this is not a time to play with this president or this country.
So based on what Steve Pieczenik is saying there, it sounds like he wants to imply this is some kind of Machiavellian move, perhaps to convince everybody that he's not a Russian agent and that he has great powers and that he wants to show off to President Xi from China, listen, if people are going to mess with the United States, I will attack. You need to get Kim Jong-un and North Korea under control. Well, that's one take. The other take is that the deep state has compromised Trump. Maybe somebody sat him down and said, guess what, Donald? Guess what, Mr. President? If you continue going on and on about the Obama wiretapping and NSA spying of your transition team and just you before that and during the election, even going back further, if you keep trying to push these nationalist policies, we'll kill you and your family. Maybe that's what's going on. Somebody had also pointed out, I think it was Jeff Rentz, maybe Jared Kushner is a Mossad agent and he's pushing an Israeli agenda because, of course, Israel wants to see us attack Syria and split it up because of the Greater Israel Project. What are your thoughts? Share your thoughts in comments after this video. I would like to get some Trump supporters and maybe people that don't support Trump. I'd like to see their comments. Are people jumping off the Trump train? Are they ready to throw Trump under the bus? Well, let's see what you guys have to say.